The resilience literature is weighted towards indicator-based quantitative approaches. Okay? So I think you've noticed that in the literature. We're looking often at survey data that's focused at the household level. The meeting that several people made allusion to yesterday on Rome, the Rome meeting, was a food security resilience meeting, but it in fact tried to draw in from the various disciplines, and the vast majority of methods were based on household data, households as the units of observation. Okay? So weighted towards quantitative-based approaches, household-based approaches. There are also a tradition primarily coming out of the United States that's small area-based assessments, so looking at counties or districts. Districts would be not considered small, but looking at districts and counties as the unit of analysis of interest, so mapping districts and counties that are resilient or vulnerable, but very quantitative in nature, okay? And there are debates surrounding whether there should be a single resilience indicator or multidimensional representation of resilience, okay? And we'll look a little bit about at that. As you notice that often it's a little of both. And the way I look at it often is that it might be fine to have an aggregate resilience indicator at a fairly large level of aggregation to monitor over time, to look for change. But it's also important to disaggregate that into the key components, since we know we've already decided, and the literature across the board is clear that resilience is a multidimensional concept. It's not a single dimension, right? So we often, although we may aggregate or we may express resilience for some purposes, largely advocacy, frankly, as a single indicator, we often want to be very clear and be very deliberate about identifying the key dimensions to resilience in the communities that we're talking about. So what are those very key dimensions? From Key's discussion yesterday, we talked about, what was it, 6 or 7 in the case of Haiti. The key dimensions vary. They vary depending upon the communities that we're talking about, and depending upon the risks and vulnerabilities faced by these communities. So the single indicator issue, which you'll run into in the discussions and which we will talk about, in my sense, the single indicator, summary indicator of resilience, is a great top-line indicator that sometimes agencies need, but probably for you, you're going to be much more concerned about what are those dimensions of resilience that may feed into a top-line indicator, right? So what are those key dimensions, and having an understanding of both empirical bases and more qualitative approaches to identifying those dimensions. And then the other thing that has to be said, where again you have a chance to make an impact, is that most of the resilience work, and particularly assessment work, is focused around, is static, okay? It's a cross-sectional look at resilience. And one of the important things for both validating your approach to resilience and for understanding what in fact does influence resilience is to have measures over time of resilience and its dimensions, right? And that's also a value add because it's not common in the community. And there are some opportunities with already available data that you can take advantage of to do that. So that's really the status of what I would say resilience assessment and analysis is. Now, one thing I would mention here is that Tulane is putting together a resilience library that will be accessible to all of you. So that is something you can draw upon. And certainly you can access us anytime you want any advice on the status and where to get materials and resources. Now, just in terms of other gaps in resilience assessment and analysis, the one big gap area is understanding the dynamics and the causal pathways. We have a lot of measures that say, hey, these are the domains of resilience, this is what resilience looks like in that community, but less literature on what are the factors that drive resilience in those communities and the dynamics of those factors and how they interact?